We're on the fourth Flaskr tutorial. In our last tutorial, define and access the database, we created db.py file, which has functions get_db, close_db, and init_app. There's 4 functions. There's an init_db_command function. This is a click command. We also created a schema.sql file, which has the SQL statements that need to be run to create the 2 tables, the user table and the post table. At the end of the lesson, we initiated this command, flask --app flaskr init-db. That created a database for us in the instance folder. It's the Flaskr SQL file. You see that we can't see the contents of this file because it's an SQL file. VS Code doesn't handle those kind of files. However, VS Code does have an SQLite extension that allows us to right-click the database and say Open Database. It will open up this SQLite Explorer right here, and if we click on the arrow, it will open up the SQLite window right here. There is nothing in the database right now, so we're not seeing anything, but when we start populating the database later, we'll be able to see the tables over here. But we do see that we have created a post table and a user table, and now move on to blueprints and views. A view function is the code you write to respond to requests to your application. Flask uses patterns to match the incoming request URL to the view that should handle it. The view returns data that Flask turns into an outgoing response. Flask can also go the other direction and generate a URL to a view based on its name and arguments. Create a blueprint. A blueprint is a way to organize a group of related views and other code. Rather than registering views and other code directly with an application, they are registered with a blueprint. Then the blueprint is registered with the application when it is available in the factory function. Flaskr will have 2 blueprints, one for the authentication functions and one for the blog posts functions. The code for each blueprint will go in a separate module. That'll be auth.py and blog.py. Since the blog needs to know about authentication, you'll write the authentication one first. So here we have the auth.py file in the Flaskr folder, and that imports the functools, and it also imports from Flask 8 different packages: blueprint, flash, G, redirect, render_template, request, session, and URL_4. It also, from the workzerg.security, imports check_password_hash and generate_password_hash. From the flaskr.db, it imports get_db. Then it assigns a variable BP equal to blueprint, and blueprint has 3 arguments. The first is the blueprint name, which is auth. The second parameter is the import name, which is dunder name. And the third parameter is URL_prefix equals the string /auth. There are 10 different parameters that we could attribute to blueprint, but only the first 2 are required. And this URL_prefix is optional, but we're giving it a prefix of auth. So this creates a blueprint named auth. Like the application object, the blueprint needs to know where it's defined, so dunder name is passed as the second argument. The URL_prefix will be prepended to all the URLs associated with the blueprint. Import and register the blueprint from the factory using app.register_blueprint function. Place the new code at the end of the factory function before returning the app. So here we have the dunder init.py file that's in the Flaskr folder, and it shows that we're to append this at the end just above the return app from /import author app.register_blueprint, and we pass it auth.bp. Then we return the app. The authentication blueprint will have views to register new users and to log in and log out. The first view, register. When the user visits the /auth/register URL, the register view will return HTML with a form for them to fill out. When they submit the form, it will validate their input and either show the form again with an error message or create the new user and go to the login page. For now, you will just write the view code. On the next page, you'll write templates to generate the HTML form. So here we have auth.py, it's in the Flaskr folder, and we are defining a register function. It is decorated with a @bp.route method. The first argument is in quotes /register. Second argument is methods equals in parens quote uppercase get, close quote comma, quote uppercase post, close quote, close parens. So basically this register function is checking if request.method equals post. We're going to assign username to the value in the form for username. We're going to assign password to the value of the form in password. We're going to assign db get_db function returns, and then we're going to assign error to equal none. If there is no username, if not username, then pass the error. We're going to assign error to the string username is required. Elif, not password, error equals string password is required. If error is none, now we're going to try to execute db.execute, and we're going to pass it an SQL query. It's going to be in quotes uppercase insert into, and then user, and we're going to pass the values for username and password that we got from the form, and then the values, that's going to have 2 question marks in parens, and that close quote for the SQL request. The second parameter for db.execute will be in parens username comma generate underscore password underscore hash, and then we pass that the password that we got from the form. And then if that all works out, we db.commit, so we commit that insert query into the database. If the try doesn't work, we accept db.integrity error, and the error is equal to f in quotes user curly braces username is already registered. Else return redirect, and we pass URL underscore 4, and we pass the string auth.login. We wrap it all up with a flash error, and then if request method equals post, if it's not a post, then it's a get, and we return render underscore template, and we pass it a string auth/register.html. So underneath that code, it says here's what the register view function is doing. It has 8 items. First item, at bp.route associates the URL/register with the register view function. When Flask receives a request to /auth/register, it will call the register view and use the return value as the response. The second item says if the user submitted the form, request.method will be post. In this case, start validating the input. The third item, request.form is a special type of dict, mapping submitted form keys and values. The user will input their username and password. Fourth item, validate that the username and password are not empty. Fifth item, if validation succeeds, insert the new user data into the database. And this involves 3 different things. First thing is db.execute. Takes a SQL query with question mark placeholders for any user input, and a tuple of values to replace the placeholders with. The database library will take care of escaping the values, so you are not vulnerable to a SQL injection attack. Next item, for security, passwords should never be stored in the database directly. Instead, generate underscore password underscore hash function is used to securely hash the password, and that hash is stored. Since this query modifies data, db.commit function needs to be called afterwards to save the changes. And then the last item, for number 5, an SQLite3.integrity error will occur if the username already exists, which should be shown to the user as another validation error. So item 6, after storing the user, they are redirected to the login page. URL underscore 4 function generates the URL for the login view based on its name. This is preferable to writing the URL directly, as it allows you to change the URL later without changing all code that links to it. Redirect function generates a redirect response to the generated URL. Seventh item, if validation fails, the error is shown to the user. The flash function stores messages that can be retrieved when rendering the template. The eighth item, when the user initially navigates to auth/register, or there was a validation error, an HTML page with a registration form should be shown. The render underscore template function will render a template containing the HTML, which you'll write in the next step of the tutorial. Log in. This view follows the same pattern as the register view above. So inside the auth.py file that's in the Flaskr folder, we're going to define the login function, and that's going to be decorated with an @bp.route method. The first argument is a string /login. Second argument is methods equals in parens quote uppercase get close quote comma quote uppercase post close quote close parens. So the login function contains an if condition. If request.method equals post, we're doing the same thing. We're getting the username from the form, we're getting the password from the form, we're getting the value for db from the get underscore db function. We're going to assign error to equal none, and we're going to assign the user to equal the db execute, and then we have a SQL statement, select asterisk from user, where username equals question mark, and then comma in parentheses username comma, and then we close the parens, and then we chain to that db execute method fetch one method. Then there's an if user is none, we assign error to equal a string incorrect username, elif not check underscore password underscore hash, user the value password comma then our assigned variable password close parens, elif not check password hash, then error equals a string incorrect password. If error is none, session.clear method, session brackets in quotes user underscore ID equals user brackets quote ID. Return, redirect, and we pass it the URL underscore 4 with the value of index. At the end of that, we say flash and we pass it error, and then if the method is not post, at the bottom we'll return render_template and we'll pass it auth/login.html. So there are a few differences from the register view here in the login function. The user is queried first and stored in a variable for later use. The fetch1 method returns one row from the query. If the query returned no results, it returns none. Later, the fetchAll method will be used, which returns a list of all results. The second item is check_password_hash method. This hashes the submitted password in the same way as the stored hash and securely compares them. If they match, the password is valid. Third item. Session is a det that stores data across requests. When validation succeeds, the user's ID is stored in a new session. The data is stored in a cookie that is sent to the browser, and the browser then sends it back with subsequent requests. Flask securely signs the data so that it can't be tampered with. Now that the user's ID is stored in the session, it will be available on subsequent requests. At the beginning of the request, if a user is logged in, their information should be loaded and made available to others. So now in the auth.py file in the Flaskr folder, we're going to define a load_logged_in_user function. And that's going to be decorated with the @bp.before_app_request method. So here in the load_logged_in_user function, the user_ID is assigned the session.get value and passed the user_ID value. If the user_ID is none, then g.user equals none. Else, g.user equals get_db method dot execute, and we pass that a SQL statement, select asterisk from user, where ID equals question mark, comma, in parentheses, user_ID, comma, close parens. And then we chain the fetch1 method to the execute method. So bp.before_app_request function registers a function that runs before the view function. No matter what URL is requested, load_logged_in user checks if a user ID is stored in the session and gets that user's data from the database, storing it on g.user, which lasts for the length of the request. If there is no user ID, or if the ID doesn't exist, g.user will be none. Log out. To log out, you need to remove the user ID from the session. Then, load_logged_in_user won't load a user on subsequent requests. And so here we're going to update auth.py again, which is in the Flaskr folder, and we're going to define a logout function. And this function is decorated with @bp.route, and we pass that the string /logout. So the logout function has a session.clear method, and then we return a redirect method that is passed URL_4 that is passed index. Require authentication in other views. Creating, editing, and deleting blog posts will require a user to be logged in. A decorator can be used to check this for each view it's applied to. So back in the auth.py file in the Flaskr folder, we're going to define a login_required function, and we're going to pass it the value view. In this function, we're going to find another function called wrapped_view. We're going to pass it the **quargs value. And this wrapped_view function is going to be decorated with an @functools.wraps method, and it is going to be passed that same view that was passed into its parent login_required function. So this inner wrapped_view function has an if condition. If g.user is none, then return the redirect method and pass it the URL_4 method with the value auth.login, and then return the view and pass it the **quargs value. However, if everything goes well, we'll return the wrapped_view. This decorator returns a new view function that wraps the original view it's applied to. The new function checks if a user is loaded and redirects to the login page otherwise. If a user is loaded, the original view is called and continues normally. You'll see this decorator when writing the blog views. Endpoints and URLs. The URL_for function generates the URL to a view based on a name and arguments. The name associated with a view is called the endpoint, and by default it's the same as the name of the view function. For example, the hello view that was added to the app factory earlier in the tutorial has the name hello and can be linked to with URL_for passing the value string hello. If it took an argument, which you'll see later, it would be linked to using URL_for, passing it the string hello, and the second parameter is who equals the string world. When using a blueprint, the name of the blueprint is prepended to the name of the function. So the endpoint for the login function you wrote above is auth.login because you added it to the auth blueprint. And we're going to continue on to the templates lesson next.